Ms. Schreier, according to a young athlete named Chelsea Mitchells, and she's pictured up here, runs track at Canton High School, Connecticut. She lost multiple state championships because her state's policy ignores the biological advantages of males over females in athletics. She maintains in a written statement that I'd like to include in the record, and I want to partially quote, "It isn't fair and it isn't right. We need separate sports categories based upon biological sex in order to fairly compete. This is what Title IX was intended to protect and preserve. If biological males are permitted to compete in female sports, there will no longer be female sports as we know it," end of quote. So to my panelists, how big is the difference between young men and women in sports?
The difference is massive. The biological effects that occur at male puberty create an unbridgeable gap between men and women, specifically with regard to contests of strength and speed. So the organizational effects of testosterone, even if the bioactive level of testosterone is later brought down, the permanent organizational effects of testosterone give men larger hearts, larger lungs, vastly greater muscle mass, bone density, fast twitch muscle fiber, all things necessary in contests of strength and speed. And in her own state, where two biological boys with no standout achievements on the boys' team were able to compete with the top female athletes, in 2019, they walked away with 13 out of 14 championship title events.
Some transgender individuals will use puberty blockers prior to adolescence, while others will not. What can you tell us about this subject and how it could affect transgender athletes who participate in women's sports? And you may have touched on it a little bit already, but expand on it if you want to.
So in my research, I have come to the realization that puberty is certainly a major dividing line in terms of the permanent and unbridgeable advantages it confers on male bodies. So I think that, it's sensible to arrive at a nuanced solution so that transgender children and youth can fully participate in sports, which I hope they can and should always feel safe and secure and able to do. But the Equality Act allows for no nuance. It applies a wrecking ball to female sports by insisting that any male who claims to be female for any amount of time, in his senior year perhaps, when he's eyeing college scholarships, has full legal entitlement to walk onto the girls' team and take one of those.
To you also, some have argued that the Equality Act has loopholes that could enable criminals to enter sex-specific settings like girls' runaway shelters and exploit vulnerable girls who reside in the facilities. This is because the bill is overbroad and changes the legal definition of the term sex in a way that eases women or erases women from anti-discrimination laws, education, and from the playing field. So, do we have reason to be concerned that anyone might abuse the Act's legal protections? I assume there's a huge disincentive to do so because transgender individuals face a lot of discrimination, but are there loopholes in the Act that bad actors could exploit to hurt women or girls in these shelters?
You don't need to be transgender to take advantage of this Act. This is not about transgender people being violent. They aren't violent. That would be a libel against them. This is about the fact that the law is so overbroad that any male felon can announce he's a female, make absolutely no changes, and transfer to a woman's prison.
Let me ask Ms. Hanson. Some have argued that the Equality Act would likely result in an end to federal security relief and disaster relief for thousands of religious schools. They also say that it might result in years of unnecessarily protected litigation for houses of worship and other faith-based entities, and they say it would compel an individual to federal partnerships with thousands of faith-based programs that serve most vulnerable people, the most vulnerable people in the United States. Are they correct? And if you want to say why. that'd be worthwhile too.
Thank you, Senator. Yes, those are correct concerns. And if I can go back to a point that Mr. Alfonso was making earlier, where he said in response to the chairman's question that the Equality Act was not going to affect religions and people of faith. And yet the distinction he drew is inside your church and your beliefs and the ability to live your faith out in the public square. And as Justice Thomas wrote in Obergefell, the decision on same-sex marriage, he talked about religious liberty, including not just the right to believe, but freedom of action. And in this country, we've been blessed that we have a robust civil society of people of all faiths, whether it's Muslim or Jewish or Christian or Catholic, that contribute to caring for the most vulnerable because their faith inspires them to do so. And in fact, the Religious Freedom and Business Foundation puts a number on it. And they said that religious contributions to the economy amount to about 1.2 trillion. But when you get to looking at things like substance abuse and recovery and things like that, we can see the dynamic difference that houses of worship make, that faith-inspired activities make in people's lives. And so it saves the government by having faith-inspired organizations working with the most vulnerable. It saves the government about $3.6 billion a year. But more importantly, it saves about 20,000 lives. And so this is because people of faith carry out their beliefs. And what the Equality Act does is it slams the door, it says, get back inside. And you cannot live your beliefs, you cannot act as a person of faith who holds these particular beliefs out in the public square. And that's not equality, that's not fairness, that's not true civil rights. We don't expand the safety and freedom of one group by taking down systems that are serving so many people. We need to find a way to respect the ability of people of faith to take their whole selves into the public square and to live out their beliefs in a way that serves so many.
My time's up. If there's a second round, I'll be back. If there isn't, I'll submit several questions for answer in writing.
Thank you, Senator Grassley. I believe Senator Leahy is available by remote. Senator, are you there?